Welcome to EcoDirect's Solar and Storage Podcast. Today we have Alex Lepore, the Regional Southwest Sales Manager. Welcome to the show.
Glad to be here, Renee. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. Today we're going to talk all about storage. There's so many different aspects that we can delve into that I thought today it would be fun to really start with kind of the history, really where we've come. I mean, we're in the LFP arena right now, but storage, we've been using storage for a long time and have seen it evolve. So how long have you been working in storage?
So it's coming up on my 4-year anniversary. And even in just in the past 4 years, I've seen storage grow immensely, from chemistry changes, sizes of energy storage, and then even on the other side, different incentives, rebate programs for energy storage just in the last 4 years. So imagine in just 4 years, it's changed so dramatically. And if we look 10 years or even 15 years ago, when some of the first batteries were getting installed, it's a completely different world from what we're used to, I think.
Oh, yeah. I mean, when we were doing battery-based systems before, it was either you were off-grid or you were grid-tie and with no batteries. And now with most systems that we're selling, if it is a grid-tie system, they're either getting storage now or they're getting their system for storage in the future. And so it's going to be battery-ready. Right. But it's so much more sleek.
Yeah, definitely.
I was like lifting those heavy batteries and getting where they're hundreds of pounds per battery and having to water them, and they're gaseous, and so you had so many different concerns that now really aren't as much of a concern. So you still get some people that are concerned, concerned about thermal runaway and things like that. So, but you, Fortress uses a different kind of cell.
Right. It's lithium iron phosphate as a chemistry, then it's a prismatic cell. And, not one battery or one chemistry works for everything out there. Whether you're living off the grid or you're trying to avoid high rates during peak times, or you just want to have something to back up your home or business, there's not one chemistry out there to do it all, quite frankly. Now, lithium iron phosphate, which is what Fortress is using, definitely has a lot of those boxes checked off. But you'll definitely still see lead acid batteries in some off-grid scenarios where temperature might be a concern, for example. Or, especially lithium cobalt is very popular in EVs because you need a very dense battery to power that car and get it from point A to point B. So, LFP is definitely the gold standard at the moment. But that's not to say that these other chemistry batteries, ranging even back to your flooded lead acid, for example, can still give you value, just depending on, where you are in your own life or your own business, whatever that is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, we have a lot of people that still use lead acid because they have an EMP hardened inverter.
Oh, I see.
And they want to be able to have storage, in the event of anything, whether it be utility shutoffs or a possible EMP event, solar flare. In lead acid, there's no communications. Yeah. So, I mean, it's just a tried and true battery system that will be available for when you need it. Kind of bulky and you have to have space for it again, but, people are still buying them.
Do you think you've seen the size of an overall off-grid system get bigger throughout the years, just as prices come down and different things fall into place? Have you seen that?
It's been huge. So, back, I've been working in solar and storage I'm coming up on 11 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It made me feel old a little bit.
Get out of here.
But it's been really fun because you've seen that complete transition. And with off-grid systems, it used to be pretty small, a couple hundred amp hours was considered a pretty large system. And, having anywhere between 16 and 24 panels was a good size. Right. Now, people are doing quite a bit more, so they're looking at 16 to 30 kW PV systems for an off-grid home. And it depends. If it's a vacation home, it's still going to be more moderate. But the overall residential size, it just overall has increased.
Well, a lot of the technology's also gotten a lot smarter, I would imagine. In your tenure in renewables, I'm sure you've seen the technology get better. You have this increase in communications. My belief would be in the next 5-10 years, then you start seeing this technology communicate with your home. Then you have a true smart home kind of deal, which I think with how the EV market is, with, for example, like the Ford Lightning, with batteries, solar, and then something like a smart load management where that person can control what loads, maybe all of our homes become microgrids and almost off the grid like they were, 10, 15 years ago, just in a different way.
Yeah, no, 100%. And that's where we're already headed too. I mean,
Right.
so Solarc has their smart panel that's going to be coming to market. There's another company called Span that does something similar. And they're using AI for artificial intelligence. So it'll tell your loads when the most opportune time is for them to run, if you program it that way, that is, to make sure that you're paying a lower amount per kilowatt hour, or using your storage to supplement that load consumption versus the utility.
Right.
So I mean, it is game changing. It's kind of, it's like that old sci-fi movie House, where everything comes to life, but hopefully in a good way and it's supporting us in this fashion. But yeah, I mean, it's so much more common now, whereas before, like it was expensive, and it's still, I mean, it's not cheap by any means, and it is like it's going to be one of the larger investments that you make, but with the utility, intermittent outages, and not only that, but the price per kilowatt hour just continuing to increase.
Right.
It went up like almost 10% in California last week.
Right. We're seeing that a lot of these utilities, they are losing money, especially let's use California, where net metering was very popular, over the past 10, 15 years, and now they're losing money. So now, we know all about NEM 3.0. Heck, we were at the rally together to know what they're trying to do to offset some of these systems that have been in place and change their business approach, because they are technically a business, no matter how you look at it in a way. So it's going to be interesting to see, California usually sets the market and then it moves east, but I'm already seeing from my eastern folks back home in areas like Georgia and Delaware, where they're already adopting a time of use rate. They're charging you during peak times. So is it only a matter of time before they say, hey, no more net metering in the US? I don't know. I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, luckily, because of our rallying and no doubt from our efforts getting out there with everyone else in LA in January, but they pushed it off for the time being, at least in California, so that, call it a win.
Huge win. That big sign definitely did some work.
Yeah, I mean, it did. It worked. Yeah. I mean, they pushed it off for now. But then we saw the increase. So, I mean, they're still going to get their money, increasing it by 9%. And it'd be interesting to see for time of use rate schedules, 9%, on 30 cents a kilowatt hour versus, 11 cents or 13 cents a kilowatt hour, and your usage times are really going to be much more impactful than it was even, a few weeks or a few months ago. So, we're seeing a very high level of adoption.
I like seeing, especially in our industry, that, you have a lot of that information go out there. And if you would ask me 5-6 years ago, why does this matter to me? I would not have had an answer for you. But now, being in the industry, some of these things, although they seem, that's in California or that's in this state, that's not going to affect me here. More likely than not, it may affect you. That's what I'm kind of understanding, is that we're much more interconnected than we may believe that we are. So it's one of those things, from my point of view as a battery manufacturer, providing that education and that information upon, what is a battery good size? How do you want to use a battery? How is your utility company going to treat this battery? Because ultimately, if I were going to be buying a battery, I would be doing my research on some of these things. And that's something that you do very well, is educating these folks on, why do I need a battery? What size battery do I need? Why is this important? How do I scale this up? X, Y, and Z. See what I mean?
Yeah, and you really have to. I mean, education is at the most basic part of it, is also the most important part, because you want to make sure that what you're getting is going to run and be used how you need it to be run, and how you're going to use it. And some people, and not to say that there's any bad companies out there, there's certainly ones that I think will steer you in a better direction, or maybe be a little bit more intuitive to your needs. But as the homeowner, there's a level of responsibility that ultimately does fall on them to make sure that, okay, the information is here. They provided the accurate details, and is not being found out later. Oh yeah, I have a huge well pump that I plan on kicking onto the system, and that's not going to be a problem, right?
Yeah.
You know, you want to make sure that the level of detail that that they're providing and that you're asking for, it really coincides with the system that they get, and then it makes the investment worthwhile.
Right.
So having independent energy now is pretty critical. I mean, it's probably from a lot of the things that are happening in the news as well, but it's just driving our market so quickly. Everyone that I talk to right now is just not only super busy, but people seem to be kind of pedaling really quickly to catch up as well. What you had mentioned that you had a couple webinars that you're able to find now. Do you think are those more directed for homeowners or installers? Kind of like
it's a good question. A little bit of everything, because we do have installer specific webinars to help with the technical side of installing batteries with solar and proper sizing, but there are definitely webinars that you can find on our website meant for the homeowners, speaking to what you need to do on your end for sizing, right? Understanding your critical load panel, understanding this is how a solar system is sized in a proper battery, and this is the kind of application or applications that we could set up the battery with, because there are some applications, whether it be a grid tied application and they're trying to avoid time of use rates, well, maybe it doesn't pan out financially for that person to discharge their battery from, let's say, 5 to 8 p.m., right? So there's so much information out there. And to answer your question, Fortress has both pieces of webinars, not only for the installer side, but also for the general person out there wanting to just kind of dive into it, right? Get a firsthand kind of spiel, essentially, on what a battery is, why it's important to them, and where is this going to take them in the future. It's interesting, the Department of Energy released a report upon the growth of batteries over the next 8 years. And by the end of this decade, batteries are going to grow over 7 times from awesome. The installed capacity and stationary energy storage. So batteries are here and they're here to stay. Now, it's really going to be a question of how do people adapt? How do you and I adapt? How do these utility companies on the state level or even the federal level adapt to what we're seeing as a very fast growing industry just in the next 9 years, mind you?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably gonna come very quickly.
Time flies when you're having fun, so
it does. And Fortress, I mean, just like your guys' name, I lean on you guys a lot from an education perspective. Right. Thank you very much for the shirt, by the way. I feel very festive. Alex brought this from his recent travels in Hawaii for me, and feeling very colorful.
Absolutely.
What I was gonna say is just for the batteries and like how we're growing Fortress. When I use you for education, you guys make 48-volt batteries.
Correct.
And it currently don't offer a 12 or 24-volt option. And I bring this up a lot with our customer base, just because a lot of people will just wire 12-volt batteries in series for either 24-volt or 48-volt system, because that's what you did with lead acid.
Right.
And so coming from a battery manufacturer perspective, I'd love to hear your thoughts on, is that, what are the reasons that we're doing it in that fashion versus, wiring it at the battery level?
Wiring in series.
Yes.
Well, wiring in series was a traditional approach in lead acid because you could use lead acid a lot more, what's the word I'm looking for? Heavily. You could really use that battery and kind of beat it up. And, lead acid was very resilient to users using it, wiring it in series. Now, lithium, it becomes a lot more dangerous when you start wiring in series because you are upping the voltage. And as you up voltage, you have more risk because you have more points of failure. You have more moving parts in your system. So that's why with Fortress, we do the 48-volt battery because it's more standard, especially with off-grid homes, for example. That's the format of how they want their system. But at the other side of it, it's a lot safer versus something like a 12-volt battery wired in series, where you have one big battery like our eVault Max that you roll in and it's ready to install. So it's less points of failure, less room for error for that installation partner, and it's also just a little bit nicer looking too, if I may say.
You may, and it is. I have to agree with you there. From just kind of like a devil's advocate perspective. Okay. Because I agree wholeheartedly. We tell our customers this, but it seems like if the batteries all have their own battery management system, why can't you program it as the user and say, we're taking 4 12-volt batteries and we're going to wire them for a 48-volt configuration? Like, wouldn't the BMS just be able to communicate that to each other?
Right, right. Well, there are different kinds of BMSs out there, and it'd be really important to read the warranty letter of that battery manufacturer, because in that warranty letter, there's definitely going to be something upon limitations or constrictions in wiring in series, wiring in parallel. Would be my feedback to you on that. So making sure you're reading the warranty letter, because that's really where, you don't want to buy this battery and wire it in series, and then you figure out that the warranty, you're not eligible for their 10-year warranty, for example. So that would maybe be one of the things I would say to it. Now, there's nothing saying that you can't do that. You can certainly do that. But I think for the longevity of the system and kind of just for your ease of mind with this battery being near your home, I would just put in a lot of that research and, maybe work with like a licensed electrician or someone who is very familiar with wiring products in series, because you can definitely do it. I'm not saying that you can, and the BMS may or may not have communication, depending if it's a MOSFET or a relay. But you want to make sure in the warranty letter, even if they are communicating, they may not warranty it. So that'd be another side to it. But I don't know. We use a relay-based BMS, and we like that because it does have that communication between our units in parallel, and there's no limitations. Now, not all BMSs are created equal. A lead acid or another lithium with a MOSFET, typically they have restrictions on communication in many units in parallel, just because of the differences in an automotive digital processor versus a MOSFET, which would be just like a piece of circuitry. Does that answer your question?
It definitely does, and we instruct our customers to go with the nominal battery voltage over system and find that in a battery storage battery storage system as well. Even when you're wiring batteries in parallel with lithium, you're using external busing, and it makes sense because they need to charge and discharge at the same rate. So you're not wiring them in parallel at the battery level. Why would you wire them in series? But there's a lot of people that may not be aware of that information or need a little bit more guidance. So looking at the warranty though, and just seeing if that's called out, there's a few that I'm going to look up after this just to see if that information's out there.
Well, you don't know what you don't know, and what, and products change and things like that. So if you have one product that maybe 5 years ago they did allow in series, but what if they went through, instead of them using a MOSFET, they did switch to relay, and they do give you that, or maybe they changed the whole format of how their cells are laid out in their system, which does not allow you to parallel in series because of how their cell layout is. There's just so many moving parts that, especially when it comes to paralleling many smaller batteries together, that's why you do see when wiring in parallel, folks have racks or one big battery, because it eliminates basically any room for human error, which does happen, or it eliminates just, failure points. It's machine. Machine can fail if you don't take care of it or if you wire something wrong. So it's one of those things, just making sure you have all your T's crossed and your I's dotted before you kind of jump into it. Test the water before you do your cannon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good one. I like that.
Yeah.
Well, and it looks a lot nicer too. But I did just find out, and I have to just share this because I didn't know, but the batteries, they come with their own standalone. You can just mount them on the floor too. So if you wanted to either wait for a rack, a lot of server racks are back ordered right now. There's back orders on those specifically. I've looked.
I've tried, I've definitely done Google.
Yeah, I have. There's a couple of different various sources, and people have asked, what are the different ways that I can mount these batteries? And pretty much any way except for upside down. Is a response on that. But no, if you're building a rack or you needed something in the interim, or maybe if you were expanding your system over time, you can start with a lower capacity than maybe you need at the end, but just get a couple of batteries, and maybe you don't get the full-fledged rack right away.
Right.
Having the floor stands is a great way for people to be able to, not necessarily have to foot the bill for the whole, kit and caboodle right away, but it gives them the ability to, take steps towards the full system goals, which which is always going to make it easier in the end.
Do you take that approach of usually using like the minimum size, and do you see a lot in your business folks adding on at a later date? Because I know with lithium, you can usually have like a 1 year grace period from like your energizing to when you can do that. Do you have a lot of folks do that here?
We're finding that more people are, to be honest, they're just going for it. They know that they can, but they're finding that instead we convey that, hey, this is the minimum that you need, and this is what you actually need. And generally we're seeing that instead of going for just the minimum, they are increasing their system size. And so we've seen people expand onto their systems, but not as much in the interim, because they're taking our recommendation and going larger from the get-go, because they know that that's what they already need. They are already starting the installation. From our standpoint, most of our customers want to just get it done now. They're afraid that they may not be able to get product down the road, which is a huge concern. A lot of people that we talk to on a regular basis, are these items in stock? How quickly can I get them? Are we looking at months or is it weeks? And usually they're pretty happy to know, like, yeah, within a few weeks you'll have it. It takes X amount of days to get it prepared, and then X amount of days to transfer it, or for the transit. And there are some lead times, but for the most part, everything's pretty fluid. I mean, there are several options for them to take a look at, and you have to build the whole solar system anyways before you drop in the batteries. So even if the batteries do have a few week lead time, it's generally okay, because they have to install the whole rest of the system first, and then they just drop in the storage aspect. So we're pretty fortunate that most of our customers are happy and very flexible. They're happy to be able to order it and know that they're getting the right materials, and that
now's a good time to invest, just because the biggest one would be the federal ITC tax credit. 26% for the cost of this. That's a quarter of the system that the federal government for solar, and it includes solar batteries. So that may be a big thing on why you're seeing a lot of folks kind of jumping in, head first, because they are able to take 26%. Because as you and I know, it's going to step down from 26 to 22,
22,
22, and then 22 to nothing. Right, I'm pretty sure 22 is the last year.
I believe you are correct on that. So we have next year, so 2023, and then after that, so in 2024. It sounds so futuristic to be honest, but yeah, you're right. We'll see. I mean, there was a push to have them re-extend it. I don't know if we'll see that, but really, we're seeing a lot of people that already have solar that want to add in storage. So there's new systems. It can almost be looked at in almost like two segues, excluding commercial, because that's a whole other part of it. But for residential, it's if you have existing solar and you want to add storage, or if it's a brand new system and you are looking at grid tie plus storage or battery ready. There's a small pocket that's, I want to be grid tied forever, and that's it, and never have batteries. But for us, we're seeing that less and less. Most everyone wants to have power if and when the utility goes out, even if they're not in a problematic area. So it's very exciting.
Another random fact for you. So the National Oceanic Atmospheric Association published a new weather report outlining the average Atlantic hurricane season. So it's numbers like your number of named storms, number of hurricanes, and the number of major hurricanes. Well, the number of named storms went up from like 5 named storms per season to 7. The number of hurricanes went from 3 to 4. Now, the number of major hurricanes is still consistent at like 2 or 3, but it's always that, that once in every 500-year storm is almost happening every year now. In my home state of New Jersey and Pennsylvania, where New Jersey's a great state for solar because of the SRECs, because you're getting so much money for the installation. Pennsylvania has a very strong grid. That's where you have a lot of grid-tied installations because of net metering. Not only do we have the whole utility side that we spoke about earlier, but storms coming right up the coast. Once a season, our poor folks down in Puerto Rico basically have a yearly hurricane that they're dealing with now, which comes right up the coast. And, we saw what happened in the Carolinas. It comes usually up right into like the Massachusetts area, and I've been affected by Hurricane Sandy. When that hit New Jersey, I remember I didn't have power for a week. And I was huddling up near my fireplace trying to stay warm. It's a real problem. It really is. It's crazy.
Yeah, I didn't see that report actually. That
It's
is
pretty
really
neat.
fascinating. I mean, just recently too, not to make it too sad about the weather, but we did have the climate change report come out recently
Right.
too, which was pretty dire. I mean, I think there's a lot of opportunity that can be taken from that as well.
Right.
There's a lot of solution based problem solving that we can all, as humanity and individually do. And reducing our reliance on fossil fuels is one of them.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a big push for just the climate to prevent, more storms like that from happening. So it's really one of the reasons. And then just, being able to have your own preparedness.
Yeah. Speaking to prepared, what would you recommend to somebody looking to get solar and batteries? Like, what things should they have prepared to then work with you? Is there like a checklist of 3 to 5 things that you'd say, well, before we speak on the phone, I need 3 things from you, right? I need like your location. I want to know what you want backed up in an outage. I don't know. What hot tub?
So,
You know what I mean? Like, what are those 3 to 5 things?
Hot tub, I wouldn't say as the number one,
Okay.
but for some
Number
people,
2, number 3.
yeah, some people might think so, but and that's great. Really, there are some very specific pieces of information that you need to know when you're sizing a backup system. Is one, where are you located? And where's the storage part going to be located?
Mm-hmm.
Is it going to be outside or inside?
Right.
Do you have a designated spot for it? And it may seem like a kind of an afterthought, like, oh, well, let's size the system first and figure out where it's going to go after. But you want to make sure that the solution you go with, the temperature rating is fine,
Right.
the physical size is fine, as well as the capacity. And this isn't in order necessarily, but really knowing what loads you want to back up. I mean, you can have realistic expectations and have a pretty moderate system. Fridge freezer lights, and then you go to fridge freezer lights plus wall pump. Some areas do an air conditioning unit.
Right.
Is a critical load.
Right.
If it's getting up, over 100 degrees on a regular, consistent basis, then yeah, that would be considered a critical load. Any medical devices and really seasonal year round, how often you lose power, and really then it's is it backup only or are you going to be doing time of use? Because that distinguishing factor, there's some other. This just from an application standpoint. There's some like tricks that you can do, not tricks, but like having the smart panel would be helpful. Load controls would be helpful, and time of use is going to be every day versus a backup system. If you're only using it a few times a year, that's all when you need it.
Yeah, I asked that because at least on the battery side, I think you hit it so well. Knowing your load profile, because proper sizing is a big deal with batteries, especially
100%.
with lithium, because a lot of these warranties that they have, it's a 10-year warranty at 8,000 cycles for Fortress, for example. But this is dependent on you sizing your system correctly with the inverter and the solar and the those critical loads that you want powered. So always on the battery side, I'm always kind of sorry about that, by the way, but
Yeah.
I'm always saying proper sizing is the first step, because that's going to basically not make or break, but it's going to determine your system longevity. How many life cycles are you getting out of it? Most batteries have a 10-year warranty. Most panels have a 25-year warranty. But those, not on the panel side, but the battery number can change based on how you're using it, based on the temperature, energy throughput, a lot of these values that maybe should be talked about more, that aren't currently, quite honestly. But
yeah, well, we're talking about it now, and
Sure.
then we've certainly got a lot of follow-up information from Fortress's
Right.
website, EcoDirect. We are consistently posting about battery storage, sizing, doing webinars, which you're a part of as well earlier this year, and I think that's really where it comes from. Educating both installers, homeowners. Here's the realistic expectations. And you're probably not going to do it super cheap and do it well, and while you probably can for some things, if it's going to be a completely integrated system with your home, it should be known it's not going to be $5,000 to do everything that you need.
Right.
And I think that just letting people know, hey, this is what you can expect, and here's how you grow into it, and this is all the right information.
Right.
And there's a bunch of solutions though. So you can kind of, pick your tract and, pick your manufacturer. We hope that you pick Fortress. We hope you pick EcoDirect to buy it from. At the end of the day, we want to make sure that you're getting the right components.
Right, right.
And that's what makes it fun.
You brought up an interesting point, and your newsletter just flashed through my mind about the financing options, right? Because that's one part of the puzzle I think that's finally coming more mainstream, is utilizing financing from companies like Dividend or GoodLeap or Mosaic, Enerbank, whatever that is, whether you're an installer or you're the end user. So again, it's another avenue where you don't need to pay cash over a fist to really get your investment in the ground, right? It's one of those things where you'd rather have it and not need it, especially with energy storage and a grid backup scenario. But I'd rather at least you take advantage of some financing options with these companies instead of going all out to what you said and having to pay whatever that cost is for a very large battery for your off-grid home or your home. So those financing options are another good avenue, at least, to just help get those folks from no solar and battery to solar minimum. Then you can add that battery later.
That's a good point. One thing that I haven't done actually recently is, and I'm sure that you'd probably tack on maybe a year or two from your ROI by doing financing, especially if you just did it for the battery portion of it,
right.
Because you'll end up being able to, especially if you're in an area that has time of use. And depending on the storage system you go with, you can do the cost per kilowatt hour and see your return for offsetting your peak loads. And if you're paying 4% APR for X amount of time, it's probably, most solar financing tends to be a little bit shorter too. But let's say that it's 2 or 3 years. Really, most ROIs in California, are 5 to 8 if you're doing a pretty large size storage. So even if you pushed it a little bit further, it's still actually you can track and you can measure your ROI.
Right.
Energy Toolbase will probably be a good one once
we get in there.
Added. Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh.
Coming soon.
Coming at you.
Yeah.
But it's definitely something, at least with financing, and we have tools on Fortress to help installers and end users not only size their home for off-grid or backup, but also for when I moved from Pennsylvania, I did pick out my rate plan, and I'm paying 5 to 8 p.m. I am paying instead of 25 cents a kW, maybe it's 50 cents. In San Diego, just south of here in Carlsbad, it may be 65 cents a kW during these peak times. So I think this will continue to see this, and I think that's where the real value of a battery will come, especially managing time of use. And then, in areas like Georgia where they're starting to adopt that, or Delaware, or even maybe in New Jersey, I did hear rumors about it. I think that's where we'll see a lot of folks wanting to do a more, you not only have backup, but you'll also be able to get some money back on your battery system. And financing does not hurt that payback, especially with some of these batteries. 10-year warranty, 8,000 cycles. If you do the math with 1 cycle a day, which would be, you're fully charged to discharge to back charge, it's 15, 17, 20 years of life. So the warranties on these products are 10 years, certainly, but depending on how you use it, again, it can be much longer. It can be much longer, especially if that manufacturer is using tier 1 products, from the cell type to the enclosure to the BMS to, obviously the inverter partners and those other sizing partners that they have. So.
That's right. But really it is too. And, with more and more people buying EV vehicles, there's a lot of charging stations popping up too. But when there's a larger outage, it affects everything.
Right.
So it's all the charging stations, those may not be available to you. Having some power, and the goal wouldn't be to just be recharging one battery necessarily with the other one, as it's available in a pinch. And if you need to be able to go, you can use your PV system, your battery storage system, to keep the lights on, keep the internet on, your fridge, freezer lights, and then also on a day-to-day, reduce the amount that you're paying.
Exactly.
And the utilities are not always, they do not have our best interests at heart all the time. They are looking to make money, and more and more people getting solar, they're doing what they have to do. So we're going to just see it continue to be a banner year and next 9 years.
Yeah, next 9 years. Well, just like solar did, and the price of solar and modules over the past 5-10 years decreased, and I believe we'll see that same trend with batteries. And great things take time. Rome was not built in a day. So no, it's not going to be in the next year that these battery prices are going to be very competitive. But the sooner you invest, you already have that option there. And then you'll have that knowledge. When you have that knowledge, you can then make better decisions in the future as those battery prices come down. And then you can adjust your needs, and then you can adjust your home. And then, it kind of just rolls it in from there. It's like when you purchase a car, right? You purchase a car and it's a very brutal purchase to start, but when you're 100,000 miles in or 150, you're definitely happy you took care of it. You put in a little extra money up front for that vehicle, because you definitely don't want to buy a lot.
I mean, that's 100% true. And you brought up a really good comment that before we wrap up here, I really want to hear your thoughts on, because customers ask all the time, well, shouldn't I just wait? Isn't the price for batteries going to come down? Isn't better technology on the horizon? And isn't it something that I should just hold out for? What do you think? I mean, really, I have my own thoughts on it, but I'm curious, from your standpoint.
It's a very fair question. And, I think anybody, when they're looking at things for their home, we're all trying to save, especially with how the economy is nowadays because of other factors that we won't delve into here. But it's one of those things where you'd rather have it and not need it, like I said earlier, and taking advantage of some of these incentives that they have now, whether you're in California and you're taking advantage of the self-generation incentive program. I do want to say, for folks out there, there's a very good incentive tool that you can look at depending on what state that you're in. It's called desire.org. It's DSIRE.org. And it gives you many different incentives and rebate programs depending on what state you're in. So, even anybody can go in there and see, okay, what state has good incentives? Where can I leverage these incentives? Because the sooner that you wait, maybe you need it before you want to wait in 8 years in 2027, right? You're not going to always have time. What if you do need something and you don't have anything? And again, it's that knowledge aspect of it. The sooner that you know about it and learn about it, then okay, this is the communication or this is the technology I want to work with moving forward. And this is how I'm going to adjust my approach when batteries are extremely cheap in 2029,
I wonder if they are going to be as cheap, or if it's, I look at the technology now and it supports the use application. It really does. So from a communication standpoint, is it going to get easier? Maybe. But we're actually seeing kind of it becoming a little bit more complicated because of the level of complexity, which is fun. There's going to be an adoption rate, and everyone's going to get on board and get educated and learn how to install and manage their energy usage more. But I think it's more important than ever to, if you have the means and you have the need, really, like the timing is right now.
Right.
Holding out for better technology, it could happen, and maybe it's at a lower cost. But if the technology keeps going up, it's hard to it would be hard to quantify if the level of communications and everything that's really going to be added into it is also going to drive the cost lower.
That's super well said, and it's even tough for me to say on the manufacturer, like, what is the battery chemistry going to be in the next 5 years or 9 years if we're thinking, or 8 years technically if we're thinking towards the end of the decade. The chemistry could be completely different, thus making that Department of Energy analysis null if the new technology being adopted is still as expensive or more expensive than what the current options are. This is all up theoretical into deliberation, but still, though, you never know. Lithium iron phosphate 10 years ago is definitely not the beast that it is today. So lithium iron phosphate in the next 10 years, maybe not. There's definitely going to be advances in the technology, the communication. I don't know. I think you have to pull all your data. You have to get all your data and really make a knowledgeable or well-informed decision on, am I doing this or am I not? Or am I starting small? Am I expanding? In my own life, I always figured, waiting it never ended up working out for me as I thought when I waited for something to happen. When I waited for this to happen, something else usually took place, and then I got lost in that. So I don't know. If you wait, you never know. That's the beauty of the future. You never know.
Yeah, that's true. I said carpe diem.
Carpe diem.
Yeah.
Yes. I love
But you know, the timing is right now. You know, with at least in the state of California, we're seeing the sense of urgency with having energy security. And if you're gonna have solar on your house, you may as well be able to store the own power that you're producing, power up your car, reduce your reliance on the utility, and just not pay as much money every single month. So, you know, I'm for today, having been, you know, seen the past 10 years, I'm really excited about the next 10, and it's going to be a wild ride. But we're going to have you back soon to talk about commercial and all the different avenues that we have. You guys have some really cool monitoring capabilities coming up too. So,
well, hopefully I can bring back some more of those lovely Hawaiian shirts for some of the team members here at EcoDirect.
Yes, I think you'll have to. But, well, thank you again, Alex Lepore, Fortress Power. It was great having you on today, and certainly a lot of fun.
Renee, it's my pleasure. I'm looking forward to coming back.
Well, absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks.